I'm joined now by the co-host of Pod Save America and Pod Save the World, Tommy Vitor. Tommy, thanks for joining me.
Brian, what a day. Good to see you, buddy.
What a day. You too. Okay, so we've obviously just witnessed a complete disaster in the Oval Office between Trump, J.D. Vance, and Zelensky, which culminated into Zelensky effectively being thrown out of the White House. And of course, peace talks are out the window at this point. So for the immediate future right now, as far as Ukraine is concerned and its effort to cast aside this Russian onslaught, what does this mean for Ukraine?
Yeah, I mean, Vladimir Putin's having a good day. Ben Rhodes and I just recorded an episode for YouTube, for the Pod Save the World YouTube, and we were debating whether this was the worst meeting we've ever seen or heard of in, like, American history. I mean, there have probably been some awful conversations that happened in the Oval Office behind closed doors, but I can never remember the President of the United States and a foreign leader going at it like this in front of the cameras. It was just a disaster for Zelensky and a disaster for the people of Ukraine. So the U.S. and Ukraine were supposed to sign some sort of agreement today about working together to get rare earth minerals out of Ukraine. That's obviously off the table. But the bigger picture goal for Zelensky in this visit was to get some sort of reassurance from the United States that we have their back still. And it's hard to watch Trump's behavior in that meeting, his mocking of Zelensky when he talked about not wanting a ceasefire with Putin because Putin was going to break it, the screaming from J.D. Vance. I mean, Zelensky must walk out of the Oval today feeling like he's just lost his most important ally, and I'm not sure he knows how to get them back.
Was there any world in which this didn't end this way? And I ask that because it feels like this is what they had intended on doing regardless.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like this just devolves into this just because that's how events unfold. I mean, this was clearly, at least in my opinion, premeditated. Things can't devolve that quickly unless you had intended on them devolving that quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I had the same impression you did, Brian. I think that Trump and J.D. Vance wanted to put on a show for the cameras and for a domestic political audience. J.D. Vance kind of gave up the game. I don't know if you noticed when he started complaining about Zelensky going to Pennsylvania in October, and he accused him of making a partisan campaign stop for the opposition. So it's pretty clear that was what J.D. Vance was mad about. I will say, I do think Zelensky is in an impossible situation. This man has been through hell. He is exhausted. He is fried. He is trying to save his country. But I do think he made a strategic error getting in that back and forth with J.D. Vance, challenging Vance, and spinning up Trump like that. Like, we know how Donald Trump is. He's a bully. He demands that you bow down before him and kiss the ring. And Zelensky just wasn't in the mood to do it.
Tommy, are we in a world where even your usual Republican, insofar as we even have moderate Republicans anymore, but where now already we've seen these Republicans that tweeted earlier today, including Roger Wicker, delete tweets that cast Zelensky in a good light? Are we in a world where not just the elected officials are going to completely abandon any adherence to, like, democracy, but also the Republican base? I'm curious what you think about both of those factions, both elected officials, even those who maybe, as late as this morning might have been pro-democracy, pro-Ukraine, are now going to just kowtow to Trump because he sent the clarion call out, and what you think about the base more broadly.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it's been a slow but steady evolution towards just completely politicizing this whole issue. I mean, in the early days of this war, it was crystal clear to everyone that Russia was the aggressor, that they invaded a sovereign nation, that they tried to take out Zelensky a whole number of times. They tried to roll tanks into Kyiv. Like, this was black and white. There was an aggressor and someone who was invaded. Like, it was crystal clear. Over time, this issue has become partisan, and I'm not sure exactly why. I mean, there's sort of the weirdness of the Trump call to Zelensky leading to an impeachment inquiry. Clearly, that's something Trump is still pissed off about. Then there's the fact that, the war in Ukraine happened or the full-scale invasion happened on Joe Biden's watch. And Joe Biden made it really a feature of his messaging. And, he believes it to be one of his biggest accomplishments. And, of course, Donald Trump is going to attack that. But you're right. I mean, now this is just completely politicized. People like Marco Rubio, who are big supporters of Ukraine, are now sitting on that couch, shrinking into his seat, looking like his soul has left his body as he watches J.D. Vance shout down this democratically elected leader who just a couple days ago Donald Trump called a dictator.
And not only that, then had the audacity to come out and tweet, "Thank you, POTUS, for standing up for America in a way that no president ever has had the courage to do before. Thank you for putting America first. America is with you." I mean, like, talk about a lack of spine. Tommy, what does Trump get out of this? Like, what does the U.S. get out of this? And the only thing that I can think of offhand is that, look, this guy wants to, there is the political aspect of this in the sense that Joe Biden supported Ukraine, and so inherently within that, Donald Trump has to be hostile to Ukraine. I mean, clearly Trump wants to be part of the autocrat club, and Putin's in the autocrat club, and so we've just kind of relinquished our defense of democracies around the world. But is that really what he gets out of this? How does he stand to benefit from this?
I don't know, man. I mean, look, there is a very sort of dark fact that I think we all just have to face up to, which is that our president looks at Vladimir Putin, looks at Xi Jinping, and thinks, I like those guys. I like their systems. I share their values. I have more in common with them than I do with a lot of leaders in Europe or democratically elected Europe. And that is just a very weird, scary thing. And I think, the part of this is a campaign pledge. I do think that Donald Trump energized a lot of people who were fed up with the post 9/11 wars, the invasion of Iraq, the fact that we were, misled and lied into war, and ran on this kind of isolationist America first promise to end the war between Ukraine and Russia on one day. He had this Hail Mary attempt at the end to try to get some money out of the deal and extort some rare earth minerals from the Ukrainians. But to your bigger question, I mean, what does he get out of this? It is hard to see. But, all the places my mind goes are pretty dark.
Well, there is also the fact that we have seen that Russia is clearly willing and able to interfere in elections on our behalf, whether they're doing it on social media or if there are other more nefarious avenues that they can do that. And so maybe this is just Trump giving his end to the quid pro quo. Like, he knows what he got from Vladimir Putin, and now he's giving Putin back what he needs, which is for the U.S. to stop funding Ukraine, which is for the U.S. to stop backing the prospect of Ukraine's access into NATO. And so this is really just kind of a handshake agreement between Putin and Trump, where Trump knows that insofar as Putin can still be helpful to him or Republicans moving forward, whether it's with these social media campaigns, with these bot farms, with whatever interference efforts they can conjure up, he'll keep doing that. And in exchange for that, Trump will give him what he wants on the international stage.
Yeah, it really is hard for me not to let my mind go back to sort of 2017 kind of Mueller probe era where you just wonder.
I know, and I say that knowing full well that like the resistance Twitter like aura that we bring, but alas,
it is hard to understand. But what people need to understand is big picture. The United States was the architect of all these institutions that were set up after World War II to try to keep the peace. Things like the United Nations and NATO that have been incredibly successful and have allied us with, allies in Europe, democratically elected allies. And now Trump is just definitively turning away from them. And it started a bit in his first term, but I think there were people around Trump, like General Jim Mattis and other people on his national security team, that would offer reassurances to the Europeans and to parts of NATO and say, look, of course, we'll support you if there's a war. Of course, we still believe in Article 5. And now in the second Trump term, you have Trump sending J.D. Vance over to Munich, to the Munich Security Summit, to lecture them, to condescend to them, to boost the far right, some would say neo-Nazi party in Germany. So it is just a very new political landscape and a very scary one.
This is a big question here, but 30,000-foot view, what does this mean more broadly for like the global world order? I mean, really what we're seeing right now is a disintegration of, or a dismantling of the post-World War II order that's led to the longest period of prosperity, I think, in world history.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, was in the Oval Office earlier this week. In the conversation he had with Trump in their pool spray, Trump once again seemed to back away or, show sort of half-hearted support for Article 5, which is the part of the NATO charter that says an attack upon one is an attack upon all. And without Article 5, NATO is nothing. It's just sort of like a loose alliance. Right. And I think what you're starting to see, like big picture, is leaders in Europe, like Friedrich Merz, who is just recent, who will almost certainly be the next chancellor of Germany, saying, we need to plan a future without the United States. We need to come together and build our own something, whatever that might be. And that is just, a dramatic change, not just of a few years of foreign policy from Joe Biden, but like 75 years of U.S. foreign policy since the Second World War.
And what does that mean for NATO? Is NATO able to exist if the U.S. isn't really a member in good standing of the organization? Like, the whole point of NATO is to be there to preserve this post-World War II order. Without the U.S., is it going to still be effective at preventing expansion from Russia?
If the U.S. fully pulls out of NATO, absolutely not. NATO is incredibly reliant on the U.S., on U.S. military hardware, on infrastructure, on sort of like enabling functions, on missile defense systems. We spend more than any other country on defense. Trump is not wrong when he criticizes countries in Europe for failing to meet their targets that they're supposed to hit in terms of the percentage of GDP they're supposed to invest in their own defenses. And so what might happen as a result of this is those countries start spending way, way, way more on their own domestic defense industries. And, it doesn't take a historian to know that like a remilitarized Germany is not necessarily a good thing for the world. Yeah. But it seems like they're just going to plot a course without us.
Okay, so if we're in a situation where NATO is no longer a bulwark against Russian expansionism or Chinese expansionism, isn't that more likely to incentivize those countries to try and get back to this imperialist posture? Wouldn't that be more likely to bring about the prospect of World War III as opposed to what Trump is saying, that Zelensky is somehow ushering in World War III? Like, isn't what Trump is doing right now the exact thing that he's claiming to want to fight against?
A lot of people think so. I mean, look, the point of NATO was to serve as a deterrent. Right. To say to the Russians, if you invade a NATO country, you will face a response from every single part of NATO. And it will be overwhelming, and you cannot possibly defeat it. But if all these little countries that were part of the Soviet Empire are suddenly on their own, you can imagine a scenario where Trump you can imagine a scenario where Putin is making incursions into the Baltic states, or taking a look at Poland, or going back into Ukraine to take more territory there. So I think a weakened NATO is very scary for Eastern Ukraine in particular.
But that's the World War III that we should actually be concerned about, not the prospect of Ukraine defending its territory. Like, if Russia's, I know Adam Kinzinger came forward and said this, but if Russia stopped attacking Ukraine, the war would be over. That's it. It's as simple as that. And so the notion that Ukraine is doing anything hostile by virtue of just defending its own territory, or worse, that they're ushering in World War III, is completely backwards.
It's absurd. And this is what's so frustrating about this. I mean, Donald Trump never talks about the reality, which is that Russia is the aggressor, that Russia is attacking Ukrainian troops on Ukrainian territory as we speak, and has been for 3 years now. I think, sort of the prospect of World War III that Trump would constantly conjure up was more, I think, the potential of a direct U.S.-Russia confrontation or Russian use of a nuclear weapon. And I think those are real things to worry about. But I think most kind of military experts would say that looking weak in the face of that kind of aggression from Russia is more likely to incentivize Putin to do more and to do worse than unity and strength from NATO countries, especially the United States.
Finally, Tommy, I want to throw your attention to this clip.
Second question for President Zelensky. No. Why don't you wear a suit? Why don't you wear a suit? You're at the highest level in this country's office, and you refuse to wear a suit. Just want to see do you own a suit?
Yeah, you have problems.
A lot of Americans have problems with you not respecting
I don't
the
have
office.
such. I will wear a costume after this war will finish.
Okay.
Yes, maybe
something
something like yours. Yes, maybe something better. I don't know. We will see. Maybe something cheaper than Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for.
So, Tommy, amid everything that's happening right now, this is Brian Glenn, Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend, speaking on behalf of Real America's Voice, real upstanding outlet. Glad we had them in there instead of the AP and Reuters. But he used this opportunity to ask about Zelensky not coming in a suit. So we've got we're back to the days of the Obama tan suit scandals. What did you make of that? Of this being the focus for right-wing media?
I would just say, imagine you're Zelensky. The U.S. estimates that 70,000 Ukrainian troops have been killed in this war, 100,000 have been wounded, tens of thousands of civilians have been wounded. Something like 19,000 Ukrainian children have been kidnapped and taken from Ukraine to Russia. And this fucking idiot is asking you about the clothes you wear. I mean, it's like you and I are so used to American politics being unserious and infuriating in the face of massive challenges. But to see this through Zelensky's eyes, like, it just made me ashamed. Yeah,
it is. What we saw today was just an international embarrassment, and there's no way around that. And look, even with all this stuff going on, everybody kind of gets that we adapt to the situation we're in. The Overton window shifts, as bad as it is, but we adapt to this kind of stuff. It does, to a degree, become normalized. I have had more people text me and say that they're just embarrassed to be an American today after what we saw than ever before, even with all the normalization that happens in politics. So really horrendous. Just a horrendous event that we just saw right now. For anybody watching right now, please, I would highly recommend that you check out Pod Save the World to get a more in-depth look at what's happening for not just what we saw today between Trump, J.D. Vance, and Zelensky, but just any international affairs more broadly. So I'll put the link to Pod Save the World right here on the screen. Tommy, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks, buddy. Great talking to you.